मैं कृष्णकांत, हिंदी अधिकारी, संस्थान की राजभाषा विभाग की ओर से आप सबों का स्वागत करता हूं। इस अवसर पर जब हम प्रोफेसर कृष्णमूर्ति सर के साथ यहाँ हैं और सर ने जो प्रिपेयर किया है साइंस एंड स्पिरिचुअलिटी के ऊपर, हम कुछ ही देर में सर से उनके वक्तव्य सुनेंगे। तो आगे बढ़ाते हुए इस कार्यक्रम को मैं चाहूँगा कि अध्यक्ष राजभाषा विभाग प्रोफेसर राजीव रंजन सर हमारे मुख्य अतिथि को लेकर आएँ, प्रोफेसर कृष्णमूर्ति को पोडियम पर। सॉरी, पी कृष्णा। मैं चाहूँगा कि कैप्टन श्रीधर वरियर, यस नोटेड सर, थैंक्स। मैं चाहूँगा कि कैप्टन श्रीधर वरियर सर संस्थान के कुल सचिव कृपया मंच पर आएं और स्थान ग्रहण करें। सर वर्तमान में संस्थान के कुल सचिव हैं। सर भारतीय जल सेना से कैप्टन के पद से सेवानिवृत्त हुए हैं, कैप्टन श्रीधर वरियर सर। अब मैं चाहूँगा कि प्रोफेसर कौशल वर्मा सर मंच पर आएं। सर वर्तमान में प्रभागों के संकायाध्यक्ष के संयोजक हैं। भौतिक एवं गणितीय विज्ञान प्रभाग द्वारा भौतिक एवं गणितीय विभाग प्रभाग के भी संकायाध्यक्ष हैं। मैं प्रोफेसर जी के अनंत सुरेश, संकायाध्यक्ष यांत्रिक विज्ञान विभाग को भी मंच पर आने का अनुरोध करूँगा। मैं चाहूँगा कि प्रोफेसर कौशल वर्मा संयोजक हमारे मुख्य अतिथि प्रोफेसर पी कृष्णा को पुष्पगुच्छ दें। अब मैं प्रोफेसर राजीव रंजन सर को मंच पर बुलाना चाहूँगा ताकि वो हमारे स्पीकर के बारे में चर्चा करें और उनके बारे में बताएं ताकि यह कार्यक्रम आगे बढ़ाया जा सके। प्रोफेसर राजीव रंजन सर।
गुड आफ्टरनून और सबको यहाँ आने के लिए धन्यवाद। राजभाषा एकक की ओर से समय समय पर हम हिंदी में, बेसिकली हिंदी एक बहाना है, एक विषय पे हम कार्यक्रम आयोजित करते रहते हैं। प्रोफेसर कृष्णा को मैंने कहा हिंदी या अंग्रेजी में जो भी आए उससे बात करें। सो ही हैज़ द फ्रीडम टू टॉक इन इंग्लिश। हिंदी मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, ना काफ़ी है। सो आप लोगों का यहाँ आने के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। मैं इंस्टीट्यूट की तरफ से जो भी हमारे पदाधिकारी हैं यहाँ पे आए, उनको भी मैं धन्यवाद देता हूँ। आज का कार्यक्रम थोड़ा सा अलग है, हटके, थोड़ा सा स्पिरिचुअलिटी और साइंस को लाने का प्रयास है साथ में। इन जनरल देयर इज़ अ परसेप्शन कि साइंटिस्ट आर अ बिट एथिस्ट पीपल मोस्टली, बट प्रोफेसर कृष्णा को मैंने इसलिए चुना क्योंकि प्रोफेसर कृष्णा खुद प्रोफेसर हैं और स्पिरिचुअलिटी में भी इनको बहुत गहरी इंटरेस्ट है। बनारस हिंदू यूनिवर्सिटी से इन्होंने पीएचडी किया, वो मैं थोड़ा बताऊंगा बाद में। और तो एक प्रोफेसर होते हुए, एक बहुत बड़े वैज्ञानिक होते हुए भी अध्यात्म में गहरी रुचि, ये कोई अनकॉमन बात नहीं है। हम लोग देखेंगे अगर दुनिया के ढेर सारे बहुत प्रख्यात वैज्ञानिक वो काफ़ी डीप सेंस में स्पिरिचुअल भी रहे हैं। डेविड बॉम का एक नाम सुनने में आता है, बहुत बड़े प्रख्यात थ्योरेटिकल फिजिसिस्ट थे और उन्होंने जे कृष्णमूर्ति के साथ कई घंटे तक वार्तालाप किया। इतनी डीप क्यूरियोसिटी थी उनको स्पिरिचुअलिटी के बारे में। तो प्रोफेसर कृष्णा भी उससे अछूते नहीं थे। मास्टर्स एमएससी करते समय भी उन्होंने ये जिंतु कृष्णमूर्ति के प्रभाव में आए और उनके फ़िलॉसफी और उनके चीज़ों को समझने का प्रयास किया। तो मैंने सोचा कि एक प्रोफेसर जो बहुत नामी गिरामी खुद में है, प्रोफेसर कृष्णा बहुत बड़े क्रिस्टलोग्राफर हैं और वो खुद भी स्पिरिचुअलिटी में इंटरेस्ट रखते हैं। तो आई थिंक ही इज़ द राइट पर्सन टू टॉक अबाउट साइंस एंड स्पिरिचुअलिटी बिकॉज ही हैज़ सीन बोथ द वर्ल्ड टुगेदर। So that was my reason for requesting him to come and give a talk on this subject. So प्रोफेसर कृष्णा के बारे में थोड़ी सी ब्रीफ में मैं इंट्रोडक्शन दूंगा। पहले मैं हिंदी में बोलूँगा, फिर इंग्लिश में बोलूँगा। प्रोफेसर पी कृष्णा का जन्म 1938 में चेन्नई में हुआ था। उन्होंने एक्सरे क्रिस्टलोग्राफी के क्षेत्र में बनारस हिंदू यूनिवर्सिटी से पीएचडी की थी। जाने माने क्रिस्टलोग्राफर प्रोफेसर एमजे बर्गर की सिफारिश पर उनकी पीएचडी थीसिस को जो पॉलीमॉर्फिज्म एंड पॉलीटाइपिज्म इन क्रिस्टल्स को एक पुस्तक के रूप में प्रकाशित किया गया, जो कि अपने आप में एक विशेषज्ञों द्वारा एक आधिकारिक पुस्तक मानी जाती है। इट्स अ बिग अचीवमेंट इफ यंग पीपल आर हियर टू लिसन टू दिस, मीन्स somebody's PhD thesis being recommended by a very well known scientist of his time, that it should be published as a book, right, is a big achievement for a person. So soon after Professor Krishna before he graduated, perhaps a book was published, and that book is an authority in that field. So it's a kind of big thing is for many PhD students. If they are sitting here, they should know about all this. ऐसा इसलिए हुआ कि प्रोफेसर कृष्णा बहुत प्रेम से उन्होंने रिसर्च किया। इनके सुपरवाइज़र को भी मैं जानता था, वर्मा जी, लवली पर्सन। तो प्रोफेसर कृष्णा 1966 से 1986 किताब के छप जाने के बाद वो BHU में लेक्चरर रहे, माने वहाँ पे फैकल्टी बन गए वहाँ पे। तो 1966 से 1986 के दौरान वो BHU में भौतिक विज्ञान फिज़िक्स डिपार्टमेंट के में फैकल्टी थे, प्रोफेसर बने। उन्होंने इंटरनेशनल यूनियन ऑफ क्रिस्टलोग्राफी के क्रिस्टलोग्राफिक शिक्षण आयोग के अध्यक्ष के रूप में भी काम किया। वो भारतीय विज्ञान अकादमी और भारतीय राष्ट्रीय विज्ञान अकादमी के फेलो भी हैं। 1986 में 1986 में जिद्दू कृष्णमूर्ति, ये उनकी उम्र करीब 45-46 रही होगी। आई एम 54, सो यू कैन सी 10 years बिफोर जो भी हमारी जीवन थी। तो उस समय जिद्दू कृष्णमूर्ति ने, थोड़ा सा मैं जिद्दू कृष्णमूर्ति के बारे में कुछ क्लिप चलाऊंगा सो दैट पीपल बिकम अवेयर। उन्होंने इनको रिक्वेस्ट किया कि आप थोड़ा राजघाट में कृष्णमूर्ति फाउंडेशन है तो थोड़ा संभालिए, थोड़ा सा मैनेजमेंट ठीक नहीं था। तो प्रोफेसर कृष्णा ने, और फॉर्चुनेटली वी हैव मिसेस कृष्णा आल्सो विथ हियर, सिटिंग हियर, and she was also a doctor in BHU. When Professor Krishna was a professor in physics department, she was a gynecologist in Institute of Medical Science in BHU. Both of them gave up their job on this request of Jiddu Krishnamurti, and they went and lived as a hermit in Krishnamurti Foundation in India, a humble people, like a humble people. So I think I need to tell all this because our generation should know what kind of people were there in the past, and they were living beings. We are all struggling to get name and fame. Here is a person who was already famous in his 40s, and somebody requested, can you take care of this foundation? And he said, yes sir, I will take care, and he voluntarily took voluntary retirement and joined that place. And since then वो वहाँ के रेक्टर के रूप में काफ़ी समय तक रहे, और अब वो वहाँ से भी सेवानिवृत्त हैं। प्रोफेसर कृष्णा कृष्णमूर्ति फाउंडेशन ट्रस्ट के ट्रस्टी हैं, लाइफ लॉन्ग ट्रस्टी हैं। और इतना ही काफ़ी है। प्रोफेसर कृष्णा ने किताबें लिखी हैं जिद्दू कृष्णमूर्ति के बारे में, वो टॉक देते हैं, डायलॉग देते हैं, दुनिया भर में इनकी भ्रमण होती रहती है। तो सौभाग्य, मैं इनका बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूँ कि ही एग्रीड टू कम हियर and also share his thoughts and feelings about what he feels about science and spirituality. I'll just speak in English for people who have not understood the Hindi. Professor Krishna was born in Chennai in 1938. He did PhD at Banaras Hindu University in the field of X-ray crystallography on the recommendation of Professor M.J. Berger, a well-known crystallographer of his time. His thesis was published as a book, Polymorphism and Polytypism in Crystals, John Willison's 1966, and is considered an authoritative book on polytypism by experts in the field. Professor Krishna was on the faculty of Physics Department of BHU during 1966 to 1986. He also served as the chair of the Commission of Crystallographic Teaching of the International Union of Crystallography. He is a fellow of the Indian Academy of Sciences and Indian National Science Academy. In 1986, Jiddu Krishnamurthy urged him to take care of the Rajghat Education Center of the Krishnamurthy Foundation of India. Professor Krishna took voluntary retirement from BHU and joined the center as its rector. Professor Krishna is a trustee of the Krishnamurthy Foundation of India. He has traveled world over to give lectures and conducted dialogues on education, science and spirituality. One can refer to the website which is there. I have shared on the broadcast. He has published a book, A Jewel on a Silver Platter, Remembering J. Krishnamurthy, Pilgrims 2015. With this brief introduction, I will request Mr. Krishna so others can just before the talk starts, so just a brief introduction. Why, for example, a person like me, I was also doing my PhD. I did my PhD from Banaras Hindu University. It's such a coincidence that my PhD supervisor, Professor Krishna, is PhD supervisor of my PhD supervisor. So there is a coincidence. And also, like him, in early age when I was doing my PhD, I was sitting and chatting with my friend's room in one of the hostels in BHU, and I just picked up a book from his bookshelf, and that was Education and Significance of Life, very thin book, and I was just turning the pages, and I was getting puzzled as I was reading more and more about it. So I said that can I borrow this book? So that was my starting point. That was 1994. And then my journey with my curiosity about Jiddu Krishnamurthy started. It was in that context I used to go to Rajghat to see. Those days YouTubes were not there and videos were also not there. So I used to go to Rajghat and listen to the video talks. There was a study center. And in the process, I introduced myself to Professor Krishna, and so that's how I am familiar to him. Just I'll play a kind of a small clip about what was the thing which really, because I can't explain about Jiddu Krishnamurthy. Very frankly, I can't talk about him. But you will see some of the things which is really, as a scientist, we look for something very, very original, and when somebody tells something looks very original, fundamental, quite different from others, we are definitely curious. A scientist is simply a curious mind, nothing more. Other things are simply skill. As a chemist, physicist, biologist, mathematician, these are all different skills. But a scientist is a curious person. In all kind of curiosity, he can't be categorized that I am a physicist, chemist. So I think that way, that's my personal experience. So I'm also curious about religion, philosophy, and spirituality, equally curious. So just to play about just some clips I made for about 5 to 7 minutes to give a glimpse of about what Jiddu Krishnamurthy is about and what are the things which...
Throughout the world are seeking comfort, but not understanding. And as long as they seek comfort, they will have spiritual comfort, because behind it there is no true understanding of life. And for the understanding of life, you require harmony. For the establishment of harmony, you require no binding or limitation on life. Please, if you understand this one radical principle, you will have understood something immense. That where there is an observer separating himself from the thing he observes, there must be conflict. As long as I say, anger is different from me, I must control anger, I must change anger, I must control my thought, I must control, change, do this. In that there is division, therefore there is conflict. Conflict implies suppression, conformity, imitation, all that is involved in that. If you really see the beauty of this, then You can observe the totality of consciousness without analysis. And order means also not only virtue, but love. And what is love? I wonder if you ever asked that question. What love is? Have you? What is love? How will you find out? Only you'll find out what it is through what it is not. Through negation, the positive comes. But if you pursue the positive, then it is the pursuit of the projection of the mind. So when you deny all the projections of the mind, by denying, in a sense, setting it aside, negating, then you'll find out what it is. So that's what we're going to do. Find out what it is not, to find out what it is. Is this, can we go on? Right. We said, what is love? You know, that's one of the most important things in life. If one has love, you can do what you like. Then there is no conflict. Then there is no evil. There is great bliss. But to imagine what bliss is and pursue that is not love. So we're going to see what it is not, and therefore come upon what it is. Therefore it's not a question of searching out love, nor cultivating love. How can you cultivate love? All cultivation is the product of the mind, product of thought. It's like a mind that pursues humility. It says, I know vanity and I must cultivate humility. And when a mind that's proud and vain cultivates humility, it is still vain. Love is joy, not the puny thing that one man has made it. And to find that out, what love is, you must also understand what death is. If you see life as a whole, in which there is this living and this extraordinary thing called love and death as a total unit, not three separate things, then what is death? Are you following all this? No, sir, do it, not follow it. Die to your pleasure. Die to your furniture. And that's what you are, your furniture. Whether the chair or the furniture that you have accumulated in your mind, which you call knowledge. so that you die every day to everything that you have accumulated. And that's what's going to happen to you anyhow. That means to empty the mind of everything known, which means the mind becomes utterly innocent. And it is only such a mind that has this extraordinary religious quality of purity that can come upon what is called enlightenment.
Thank you. I'll now request Professor Krishna to start the talk.
I'm thankful to Rajiv for giving me this opportunity to express some of my thoughts about science and spirituality. These have been two great inquiries of the human mind to find out what is truth. The scientific inquiry is concerned with the truth about the way the external world of nature functions around us and the laws that govern the order which we find in nature. The spiritual quest of man is older. You find mention of it in the Vedanta, the Upanishads, then the Buddha, and there have been great religious people who have come upon a consciousness that was free from any form of disorder in the form of anger or jealousy or attachment. So that is a different kind of truth about the causation in our consciousness. Now, as far as science is concerned, when we were students, physics, chemistry, biology, and so on all appeared to be separate, distinct subjects. They have all become one continuum now, starting with the Big Bang, the creation of the universe, the creation of atoms and then molecules, then RNA and DNA, and that goes into biology. So, physics, chemistry, and biology have all become unified into a single science. And the scientific quest of humanity has progressed very fast, rapidly. It has changed the way we live, and so on. But the spiritual quest, though it is older, has not progressed. Modern man is as ambitious, jealous, egoistic, self-centered as the primitive man was. So there has been no psychological evolution. Just as there have been great scientists, there have also been great religious teachers who came upon a consciousness which had love, compassion, non-violence, and they talked from that consciousness. Around them, different religions have been built, and the religions have created belief. They have prescribed what is right and what is wrong to do in life virtue and vice, and exhorted their followers to cultivate virtues and eliminate vices. But human beings in any of the religions have not been able to do that. You don't find Christians really living Christ's teaching, nor the Buddhists living Buddha's teaching, nor the Gandhians able to live Gandhi's teaching. Because they have not come upon that consciousness. They have only agreed with the teacher. They have built a temple to the teacher. They have praised the teacher, considered him to be an authority. And they have not themselves inquired into it. In the 13th century, in Japan, there was a philosopher named Basho who said, don't try to follow the wise man. Pursue the wisdom which he had. And unfortunately, the religions did not do that. So, science also got blocked like that when it accepted Aristotle as an authority. And nobody would question what Aristotle said. Doubt was not permitted. For 2000 years it blocked the progress of science. It's only in the time of Galileo and Newton that what we today call modern science began, because they developed a scientific method by which any theory, any speculation given by any scientist could be tested. In the religious field, the authority was accepted and people got divided between religions, and there have been more religious wars and violence in the name of religion than even in the name of property. So it becomes the very antithesis of religion, because religion was meant to change the consciousness of man and make him into a better human being. You must have read about the war in the Mahabharata, perhaps 3000 years ago. And that war is still continuing. Every day in the newspaper we are reading about war. There is a Shakuni, there is an Arjun, there is a Bhishma Pitama, today as there was at the time of the Mahabharata. So there has been no progress in that direction. There has been progress in knowledge, there has been material progress, our lives externally have changed dramatically, but inwardly, in the inner world of our consciousness, we have not progressed. Because you need to have wisdom. It is wisdom that brings about transformation in consciousness. And wisdom means you have actually perceived the truth for yourself. You are not agreeing with a truth which somebody else is pointing out, however great that man may be. We have forgotten that this is also an inquiry, a quest for truth. Although our scriptures said that, Satyam nasti paro dharma, there is no truth higher, no religion higher than truth. This was stated in the Mahabharata. But we have not pursued the truth. We have pursued a particular teacher and become followers of the teacher or of a particular religion. And so belief itself has divided, and science doesn't accept belief because science is an inquiry into truth. Therefore, a big divide has come about between science and this religious quest. And unfortunately, because of that, in education, we have cultivated only the scientific inquiry and relegated the religious inquiry to all these so-called established religions. That has been unfortunate because you need to understand yourself and your consciousness, because that's what brings wisdom. And without wisdom, knowledge is misused. Knowledge gives you power. It gives you ability to earn money. Money also gives you power. You become rich, you become powerful. What tells you what is the right use of that power? So often power is misused to dominate and for selfish ends, both individual power and state power or religious power. So without wisdom it goes wrong, and the only way to come upon wisdom is to pursue this inquiry, which is called self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is not the knowledge about the self, which you get from a psychology book or a teacher. Self-knowledge is that knowledge which you gather from your own perception of what is true and what is false. And that is true in science too. People believed, for example, that the earth is flat. For a long time they believed that, but it's only when it was pointed out that they did experiments, they made measurements, and they found that it is really not flat, it looks flat, but that is because it's a sphere of very large radius, and any small area on the surface looks flat. And similarly, for a long time, people believed that the earth was the center of the universe, and we found that it was false. So one has to do this observation with an inquiring mind, not accept what your observation tells you, but to doubt it, question it, and discover what the truth may be, and not accept what your own observation is telling you, or what your own mind is telling you. That means you posit the truth as the unknown. Now the unknown cannot be reached through thought, because thought is a product of the known. The known sits in our memory and enables thought. Thought is the response from that memory. It can't therefore reveal the unknown. And truth is the unknown. So it requires a creative perception. And there have been great scientists who have come upon such perceptions and brought about a paradigm change in the field of science. And similarly, there have been people in the religious field who have made that kind of creative perception and come upon a transformed consciousness, not just transformed opinions, but transformed consciousness. That is the purpose of the spiritual quest. So I would say that the different religions of the world, the established religions of the world, are byproducts of the spiritual inquiry. Because how did the Buddha come upon that kind of consciousness which he lived with? He was brought up as a Hindu. He was raised as a Hindu. But he went past Hinduism. He saw the falseness in what was being taught in Hinduism and discovered something new. How does a human mind discover something beyond the known? That requires a certain amount of doubting or questioning of the known, which is what it means, freedom from the known. If we take the same kind of example in science, for years together, we all believed, scientists all believed Newton, that space and time were totally independent of each other. And Einstein was educated in that classical science of Newton. In one's experience, one never found space and time interacting with each other because one doesn't come across velocities comparable with those of light. So how did the consciousness or the mind of Einstein discover that space and time are not independent of each other? It was not in his training, it was not in his experience, and yet he could find it out. That's because the human consciousness has a capacity to make a foray into the unknown and pick up a new fact from there and bring it into the field of the known. There is a very beautiful book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. It is his MIT thesis which was published. In that he says that scientists working within a certain paradigm keep contributing to data within that paradigm, doing experiments within that paradigm. But occasionally a person comes who changes the paradigm completely and brings a new view into the world, into the facts of the world. So relativity was like that, and quantum mechanics was like that. How did those minds come upon it? That is what is called an insight. An insight is not a thought product or an activity. The thought and the knowledge can create the question in the mind, but they can't answer that question because the answer lies outside the boundaries of the known. So, what Krishnamurti pointed out was that you must doubt the known. The known is your conditioning, your culture, you are brought up in your particular family, in a particular part of the world, and you pick up all kinds of notions from that culture. Not all of them are healthy, not all of them are true. So you must examine and learn for yourself, question it. Otherwise you judge everybody else from this particular conditioning, which is just an accident of birth. You happen to be born in a particular family, in a particular culture. And that conditions your mind, and you now judge everything on the basis of that conditioning. And the other man is similarly conditioned differently in his culture, and then you fight with him. It divides people. So one has to be able to go beyond that and see the truth, rather than accept and adhere to what your own culture is telling you. There may be healthy things in that conditioning, but unless you examine, you don't know whether what you are adhering to is healthy or not healthy. For example, there is casteism. Now, casteism is not true, but somebody introduced that into the Indian society. We don't even know what are the circumstances then because of which it was introduced and so on. But today we see it in operation, and it creates discrimination. You treat the Shudra's child differently from the Brahmin's child, when in actual fact there is no difference between them. The difference would, the Shudra's child would grow with the same capacities and so on as a Brahmin's child, given the same environment and education and capacities. So it is nothing to do with that. Once you discover that it is false, you can free your mind of that. Similarly, for centuries, men have believed that women were assistants to them and inferior to them, when in fact the truth is that human beings are born in two forms, one male and the other female. There is nothing to say that which one is superior to which one. They are a little bit different from each other, but they are equal. So these false concepts in the mind play havoc in our life and also therefore in society. And this spiritual quest is for the ending of these illusions. Because it's from these illusions that all the negative emotions arise within our consciousness. And that an illusion can be ended because by discerning what is true and what is false, the false can be ended. So you can find out that this illusion is not true. That's what we do in science. That's what needs to be done also in this spiritual inquiry. But instead, we have been told by our culture to adhere to our particular religion, be proud of it, and propagate it, and so on. You may be propagating illusion of your own brand, and the others are propagating their own illusion. So truth becomes a travesty. That's why what I want to point out in this talk is that these are two complementary quests for truth. One about the external world, the other one about the truth about the inner world of our consciousness, the way it operates. And we need both, because we need knowledge to function in life, and we also need wisdom for having right kind of relationships. We have not come upon wisdom, we have come upon tremendous amount of knowledge. So the mind has had a lopsided development, extremely knowledgeable, but lacking in wisdom, and that leads to most of the ills in society can be traced back to this development. That's why Krishnamurti wanted to change education. He wanted that just as you develop and cultivate the scientific inquiry, you should also cultivate the religious inquiry or the spiritual inquiry in the mind of the child. Not simply tell him, do this, don't do this, this is not right, that is not. Your decision is a very superficial thing. You can decide what to wear, what to eat, which kind of car to buy, and so on. But can you decide to be peaceful? Can you decide that you will not worry from tomorrow? Test it out. See, your decision won't work. Because there are deep-rooted causes for that disorder in consciousness, and unless you eliminate those illusions which cause that, the consciousness does not transform, only your ideas transform. And these ideas itself differ from Christians to Hindus to Muslims and so on, and you fight over that. There is a beautiful verse that points this out, that knowledge does not lead to wisdom. It runs like this. It says, knowledge and wisdom, far from being one, oftentimes have no connection. Knowledge dwells in minds replete with the thoughts of others. Wisdom in those attentive to their own. Knowledge is proud that it knows so much. Wisdom is humble that it knows no more. And we need both knowledge and wisdom. Without wisdom, knowledge goes wrong. The use of knowledge goes wrong. So I have a number of slides which I want to show you.
The first one.
To make this point which I have, thank you. Rajiv has been kind enough to get it translated into Hindi. I know the Hindi of everyday speaking because I have grown up in North India for the last, since birth I have been in North India. But I have been educated in English, and all talking and so on, serious conversations have been in English. So I am not, that's why I am speaking in English. Because I think that it is important to be precise in your expression, and that is only possible in the language which you have been educated in. The first slide mentions the scientific approach. It says, posit reality as the unknown. Start with observation. Any phenomenon, you observe it carefully. Measure whatever quantities you can measure. Then among the measured quantities, you look for empirical correlations. So, the current in a metal is proportional to the applied voltage and so on. We have all done those experiments while learning science. Those are empirical, Ohm's law, laws of elasticity and so on. They are not fundamental laws, they are merely correlations. Then comes the big step of guessing what is the underlying reality. That's where the creative talent of a scientist comes. And then you have to test whether that model of reality which you have guessed, underlying reality, is true or not true. To that you apply the known laws of nature, you apply reason, logic, and a peculiar form of logic called mathematics developed by the human mind, which somehow has application in nature, and you develop what is called a theory. That theory makes predictions of new facts which ought to be there, rational from the reasoning. Then you, in order to verify whether those predictions are correct, you do experiments again, you go back to observation, and two possibilities arise. Either your measurements show, your experiments show that the predictions are wrong, in which case you have to reject the model which you had guessed and rethink the model. Or often it happens that it approximately meets the predictions but not exactly. Then you know that you have to refine your model, and so that your predictions tally with the experiments. So science develops in this by using this method through successive approximations to reality. What Newton said was not unreal, but it was approximate. What Einstein did was beyond that. Now, values are not the subject matter of science. There is nothing in science to say whether you should be kind, you should be violent or non-violent. It's not a field of science. But the way science is done has in it implicitly certain values which I have listed here, which is part of what is called scientific temper. One, that posits the reality as the unknown. Inquire, observe, question. Doubt all conclusions. Have an open mind. Don't accept on authority. Respect dissent. Demand evidence, proof, and reason. Objectivity, which means the fact which you determine must be independent of the observer. It should be possible to repeat that in any other part of the world and by anybody else. In other words, the ultimate truth must be universal and should be independent of time and space. So the natural laws which science discovers apply in your scientific laboratories. They also apply out there in space, and that's how science has progressed. reproducibility, an international dialogue is going on. That means I do some experiments here, I publish my research paper, it goes all over the world in a journal. Other scientists repeat that, then they write their comments on what I have said, and if by this process of dialogue between scientists who don't even meet each other, you determine which one is correct, and only when it is found to be true and correct, it becomes part of the knowledge of science. So there is only one science. Now, if spirituality is also an inquiry into truth, why should there be so many different religions? There should be only one religion. A religious mind must be a single mind which is having this same quality. The only thing is you can't make measurements in consciousness. So the scientific method is not applicable, but those scientific values, the scientific temper is applicable. So science is a body of knowledge, some of which is nearly certain, some rather uncertain, but none of it completely certain. This is a definition of science given by Feynman, who was a Nobel laureate. Some of these scientists, as Rajiv said, were also philosophers or interested in philosophy. So Galileo said mathematics is the alphabet with which God has written the universe. Now it's a strange fact, it's a mystery. Why mathematics, which is a form of logic, symbolic logic, developed by the human mind, applies in nature, but somehow nature follows that logic. And so we have been fortunate to discover this language of nature, otherwise science could not have progressed so much. Heisenberg said science points to some central design, some purpose in the universe. Einstein said the religion of the future will be a cosmic religion. It should transcend a personal God and avoid dogma and theology. Covering both natural and spiritual, it should be based on a religious sense arising from the experience of all things, natural and spiritual, as a meaningful unity. Schumacher said the modern experiment to live without religion has failed. And Schrödinger, this is the one that I particularly like, what Schrödinger said. You know that Schrödinger was a great student of Vedanta. He says, I consider science an integrating part of our endeavor to understand the one great philosophical question which embraces all others. Who are we? I consider this not one of the tasks but the task of science, the only one that counts. Which means he's saying you must explain the body, which means the atoms in the body, the functioning of the body and so on. You must also explain the consciousness. And that's where there is a big gap right now in science. That we, starting with the Big Bang, you have all the thing, but you can't explain what is consciousness. We can't explain how awareness arises, starting with matter. And according to the Big Bang, it was matter which was primary. All the religious people have said that consciousness is primary, and there is a universal intelligence, which is the intelligence of nature, and all these laws which science is discovering are merely a description of how that intelligence operates of nature. I mean, look, the mango tree creates mangoes out, a mango out of the atoms in the soil. Does that not require intelligence? How do you make a mango? No scientist can do that in a laboratory. But we consider that it requires a lot of intelligence to create a computer, but not to create a mango. We take it for granted, as if it all happens mechanically. And the religious people have said that there is an intelligence operating in the universe. You can call that intelligence God if you wish, but not a personification of that. Einstein said, science without religion is lame, religion without science is blind. The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It's the fundamental emotion which stands at the cradle of all true art and science. It is in fact nothing short of a miracle that the modern methods of instruction have not yet entirely strangled the holy curiosity of inquiry. For this delicate plant, aside from stimulation, stands mainly in the need of freedom. Everything is determined by forces over which we have no control. It is determined for the insect as well as for the stars, human beings, vegetables, or cosmic dust. We all dance to a mysterious tune intoned in the distance by an invisible piper. So he's talking about that intelligence of nature. Here is what Krishnamurti said about the religious mind. When I said there has to be only one religious mind, he says the religious mind has no beliefs. It has no dogmas. It moves from fact to fact. And therefore the religious mind is the scientific mind. But the scientific mind is not the religious mind. The religious mind includes the scientific mind, but the mind trained in the knowledge of science is not a religious mind. He said that in 1961 in Paris. I conclude this talk by summarizing what I have said. Science is a quest for discovering the order that manifests itself in the external world around us. Religion is a quest for discovering order in the inner world of our consciousness. That doesn't already pre-exist. Therefore, you have to discover it by ending the disorder in the consciousness. And since disorder in consciousness arises from illusions, it can be ended by pursuing what is true and what is false. Because when you see the false as the false, it drops away. There are two complementary quests for truth about two aspects of a single reality, which includes both matter and consciousness. Antagonism or contradiction between them is the product of a narrow vision, a mistake in our understanding. Technology is a byproduct of the scientific quest. Orthodox religions are byproducts of the religious inquiry or spiritual inquiry. Thank you. I'll end it here and maybe we can have some.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद प्रोफेसर कृष्णा for the fascinating and
You can ask questions also in Hindi. I can understand questions, but I may reply in English.
Talk is open for questions, please. Mic दीजिए.
Thanks for your sharing your thoughts on these two aspects of inquiry. So it's more like if you share a few of your thoughts. This is on a broad philosophical perspective, if I can say. You discussed about two aspects, but then comes the day-to-day aspects, so to say. So where you concluded about this orthodox religion, which if I can use the word that it's a kind of a degeneration of that spiritual inquiry, or it's an institutionalization or it's organization. And I have noticed that the poster that was created, it has that assertion from Krishnaji that the truth is a pathless land, where he, after being nurtured to become the world religious teacher, he actually went ahead and disbanded that organization. And so that spiritual inquiry he is suggesting essentially, and then throughout his life he is essentially suggesting this is as a pathless land where you have to inquire yourself.
It's pathless in the sense that you can't get to it through thought.
Right.
It needs an insight. It needs, like Einstein's insight into space and time. It needs an insight. So the religious truth also needs an insight.
Right.
The known and the existing known can create the question, but it can't answer that question.
Right.
If it answers that question, it is inventing. It's not creating. Creativity means it is beyond the known.
Right.
Yeah. So you need to have certain amount of freedom from the known, which means you must be able to doubt the known and have this curiosity. Both, if you see the origin of the religious quest and the origin of the scientific quest, they have a common origin, which is the inquiry, the spirit of inquiry innate in human consciousness. Man has, right from the beginning, asked the question, why is the sky blue? Why are there so many different forms of life, and etc. Those were questions of the religious inquiry. And similarly, he asked questions about the earth or about the planets moving and so on. It became the scientific inquiry. Both have originated from inquiry. The purpose was not to create technology or to create religions. This was a byproduct of that inquiry. One has to continue with the inquiry and not get trapped in the byproduct. That is what I am trying to say.
Absolutely. So my question, or rather, if you can share your thoughts. So this is what happened with this institutionalized religion.
Yeah.
Now, because you have mentioned creativity, so we can come to David Bohm because he and Krishnaji together inquired into this question of creativity. So my question related to this is that science also in its institutionalized form, does it in a way affect that inquiry? So rather than facilitating this inquiry, can it come in as a barrier to this inquiry? If you have any thoughts based on your experience also as a scientist and then working in the Krishnamurti.
For 2000 years. But as soon as they adopted the scientific method, which is modern science grew, it's no longer a matter of what Einstein has said or what Newton has said or what so-and-so has said. It is a matter of putting it to test by this method. You do experiments, you make predictions, and if they don't tally with the predictions, you have to discard that as false. Because they accepted this method of doing it, it has progressed so much. Unfortunately, in religious inquiry, we have not done that. We have not continued with the inquiry. We have concluded and built a temple around our teacher and all this. And the other man builds a temple around his teacher, and then they fight with each other. So that has been the travesty, that has been a block to the spiritual inquiry. It is a field of self-knowledge, what Socrates in the West called self-knowledge, that you have to inquire into your own consciousness in your daily life. through your observation with a learning mind. Learning mind is the mind with a scientific temper. And discover what is true. Not just accept what your teacher may be telling you. So, Krishnamurti said, you are the teacher and you are the taught. There is no teacher outside. Because the answer to a question does not lie outside the question. It lies inside the question. So your job is to investigate the question and come upon the answer. As a metaphor, if I may say so, to explain this point, if you know, we take children to garden, we hide a treasure somewhere and we make the game called treasure hunt that we tell the children now do and find. It is pathless, you don't know where the treasure is. The question determines the field in which you are investigating, but you don't know where the answer lies. So you have to have that sense of wonder, curiosity and so on. And you may chance to find upon it. It's a creative finding, creative perception. So it's like that. Truth is like that. Therefore there is no path to it.
Just as in the individual realm of things you define consciousness, is it all possible to look at a comprehension of a universal consciousness on a macrocosmic scale?
See, sir, that is a disputable thing because scientists don't accept universal consciousness. They think consciousness is a product of matter, and that in the human mind it operates in this way, in the animal it operates in a different way and so on, because the matter is organized in a different way. But this is disputed because, and we don't know the answer to this question. The religious people say no, it's the other way around. Consciousness was there first, which means all your laws of nature and so on were there. That's what is operating in the, and that they call is universal consciousness.
Thank you for your talk, sir. My question is, how does the objectivity value in the scientific method translate to the spiritual quest? Because in my understanding, spirituality is an inherently subjective quest. And while experimental observations may be the same for two different observers, spiritual experience or spiritual insight differs quite a bit. So how can we get objective in our spiritual quest? Yeah.
It is far more difficult to be objective in the spiritual inquiry because you are looking at your own consciousness, and the interaction between the observer and the observed is very intense. If you have desires, if you have belief, if you have some opinions, they interfere with your perception. When I am looking at a pendulum and trying to understand how it oscillates and how it depends on the length of the pendulum or the time period and so on, my desires don't enter into it. It's relatively easy to be objective. So the religious quest is much more difficult than the scientific quest, and you don't have a mathematical method of logic and so on which you can use here. But the ultimate truth is one. The ultimate truth is not different for the Christian and different for the Hindu and different for the Muslim. So what is the ultimate truth? That has to be the question, that is, rather than aligning yourself with your brand of illusion which your culture has propagated. That is what has bogged down the spiritual quest. This is also a quest for truth.
My question is about insight and thought over here.
Yeah.
Right, so you talked about insights and you said that it's different from thought, and insight has a significant role to play. Now if I look at it from, somewhat it looks like insight is somewhat similar to gut feeling, if that's one way to sort of put it in.
No, sir. Gut feeling is also from the known, because it's a you know a number of things and you have a gut feeling about things. Insight is beyond the known. It's not in your training, it is not dependent on your background, it's freedom from the background. It's like the Buddha walked out of Hindu background which he had. Krishnamurti walked out of theosophy, and Socrates walked out of that Greek thing. All these great teachers, Christ walked out of the Jews. Jews believed that an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. And how did he come upon this fact that no, when somebody hits your cheek also don't retaliate with violence? So he came upon some new finding, no? Totally new. So it is not based on the previous thought. The thought might have created the question. That I leave it as. Known can create the question. The known about the world and the experiments of the world in science created the question in the mind of Einstein. All that he knew was something is wrong with our understanding because we are not able to explain all the observed facts. Right? That's all that he knew. And he must have known as an intelligent scientist that somewhere my assumptions must be wrong. And so he questioned this. Is space and the assumption that space and time are independent of each other, can that be wrong? And then of course, the question can be refined. But ultimately you have to come upon that insight. Insight is this ability for the consciousness to make a foray into the unknown and pick up something and bring it back. So that's why that book I referred to, the nature of scientific revolutions, it talks about this. How does this insight take place? It is a process of awareness, capacity, which is other than thought. Awareness is not a thought faculty.
Yes, please go ahead.
So there have been bitter controversies in science and among scientists.
Yeah.
So do you think spirituality will foster peace even if we get together?
If you come upon love, compassion and non-violence in your consciousness, if more and more people do that, it is difficult. On a mass scale it is difficult. That's why I think they gave it up. But when you give it up, you see the result of what is in the world today. This is what happens. We are fighting. Our wars are much more dangerous than they were at the time of the Mahabharata. We were fighting with bows and arrows and fire, and now you are using nuclear power to fight wars. You are going to annihilate yourself. So is it really progress or it's really not progress?
Thank you, sir.
What we call intelligence may not be intelligence. Because it's not leading to survival, it's leading to destruction.
We have J. Krishnamurti or a few others who have spoken about the truth. But how do we start with the conclusion for our own inquiry? How do we start with the conclusion that there is a truth, like a singular truth, and also in our current daily life, then what is it that we refer to as the lie?
Yeah. Krishnamurti repeatedly says in his talks, sir, don't accept what I say. Question it, investigate. Now, why does he say that? Because most gurus don't say that. They say, मैं तुम्हें बता रहा हूँ, उसको मानो. He says that because unless I rediscover the truth which the Buddha discovered, it doesn't become a truth for me. I'm merely repeating what Buddha has seen or what Krishnamurti has seen. That's not the truth for me. Truth is at the level of perception, not at the level of ideation. Ideas can be shared and can be spread, but truth cannot be shared. So that is the difficulty, that each human being must do this for himself. You have to be a light unto yourself. Those were the words of the Buddha. That is the difficulty of this quest. That is why it should be part of education, because all children would have to go through this, all children would then be inquiring, and so on. That then is a possibility. But instead of that, if you think you can do that through propaganda, we have already tried propaganda. Marxist propaganda, Christian propaganda, Hindu propaganda. What has it done? So you have, your observation is that all that has not worked. What are you going to try now which you have not tried already? We have tried laws, we have tried politics, we have tried various dictatorships, we have tried all religions. At the end of it, we are where we are. And all our newspapers are showing we are perhaps the worst species on earth.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, sir, what are the methods that you recommend for this spiritual quest? Because we know in scientific quest that there are experiments that we do and we come to conclusions, but in spiritual quest, how is it translating? Is it like we sit and think about it and then we arrive at a conclusion, or what are the...
No, it's not an intellectual inquiry. So, the suggestion is that when you get angry, find out where does this anger originate in you, from where does it originate. And if you really observe intently, pay attention and so on, you will find that it originates from some notion which you are having. You must question that notion. That's the false thing that is creating the disorder.
Yes, go ahead.
Is it on? Are you able to hear? Okay. Sir, life, whether it is in the scientific world or in the spiritual world or in not nominated as scientific or spiritual, but generally as a man is experiencing, it is a dynamic one. It is never static. Never static. Now, in all these things, there is an observation and an observer. And can there be an observation without the observer? That 1 minute, let me finish the question. Observer meaning it is the past.
Yeah.
It is the knowledge. It is already there, and with that we see the present, which is this. Whether it is in the scientific field or in the normal spiritual field or in the small at all. Therefore, is there an observation without the observer?
Yes. Let me answer. There was a thought for the day in Times of India. I don't remember the author, and it's not important who said this. But it struck me. He said, human beings are not disturbed by what they see. They are disturbed by their opinion about it. That opinion comes from your past predilections and so on. If a widow marries, the Hindu says, the Muslim doesn't say that. So your background creates your reaction. All reactions are false. Those reactions are from the background. And therefore, the freedom from conditioning, which is the freedom from this personal background, that is the observer. The personal background from which Krishna reacts is his conditioning. And if I can't free myself of that, I have no way to come upon the truth. Because I have already taken sides with all the opinions and all the knowledge that I have. I am judging everybody else on that basis. And to see the falseness of this, then it drops it. That is the ego, sir. The attachment to your own knowledge, your own experience, your own conditioning is the ego. So the dropping of the ego is the same thing as freedom from conditioning. And is the same thing as the silent mind, because then it's not a reacting mind, it's a learning mind. A learning mind is not reacting. If I may, since we are talking of science and spirituality, how does a scientist study a fish? He observes, how does this fish swim? How is it born? How does it lay eggs? What does it eat? And so on. He doesn't say, stupid fish, it shouldn't do this way, it should go that way. But when you look at yourself, you have all these opinions about it, judgments about it. That, when you see the falseness of that reaction, that it is blocking you from perceiving the truth. You are perceiving the truth through the spectacle of your own coloration. Then you don't see the truth. So, it is possible. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not easy because we identify, that is the me with which we identify. So this identification with one's own conditioning is the ego which is the problem. That is why all, Vivekananda also, if you read, or Ramana Maharshi, they are all talking about freedom from this observation.
सर मैं जितना स्पिरिचुअलिटी को समझ पाई हूँ तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि झूठ को काटना, जितना आप अपने झूठ को पहले देख सकना और फिर उसको काटने की हिम्मत रखना, तो वही स्पिरिचुअलिटी है जितना मैं समझ पाई हूँ। और तो मैं ऐसा जानना चाह रही थी आपसे कि जैसे आपने एक सच्चा जीवन जिया होगा, मैं ऐसा अज्यूम कर रही हूँ, तो अगर कोई इंसान 40-45 साल एक सच्चाई के रास्ते पे चलता है तो उसका जीवन कैसा होगा? क्योंकि सच्चाई का रास्ता तो बहुत ही कठिन होता है। सच्चाई वो सच्चाई नहीं जो दुनिया कहती है कि ये सच है ये झूठ है, वो नहीं, लेकिन अपने आप की सच्चाई पे चलना अत्यंत ही कठिन होता है। और अगर हम अपने झूठ को पकड़ भी लेते हैं फिर भी उसको काटना बहुत ही मुश्किल होता है। एक तो मेरा ये आपसे प्रश्न है कि
एक करते हैं पहले,
ठीक है, तो
इस उम्र में ना याद नहीं रह सकती।
ठीक है, तो एक सच्चा जीवन कैसा दिखेगा और आपका अपना जीवन कितना सच्चा रहा?
खतरा रहता है क्योंकि आसपास के लोग आपके बारे में क्या सोचते हैं उसका आपके ऊपर कोई अधिकार रहता नहीं। तो गांधी जी को मार दिया कि नहीं? हाँ, और वो आज भी प्राउड हैं वो लोग जिन्होंने मारा, क्योंकि उनको कुछ उनकी धारणा थी कि ये मुसलमानों को फेवर कर रहे हैं, वो अपने देश के खिलाफ कर रहा है ये आदमी करके उन्होंने। तो ये इस तरह की धारणा और इस तरह का जजमेंट जो है वो गलत चीज़ है। यू हैव टू फ्री योर ओन माइंड फ्रॉम डूइंग दैट with your husband, with your brother, with your not judge, observe what is different from me. He likes to do these things this way. You can consult, you can give advice, you can talk to the person. It is for him to learn. You can create the question in his mind. But if you can try to control him or you say, nalayak hai, bewakoof hai, ye is tarah kar raha hai, then you are merely judging him. No? Same thing in education, Montessori says, the teacher's job is not to judge the child, not to rebuke the child, humiliate the child and so on. He is a friend of the child. He is helping the child to grow. No. Can we take that attitude towards everybody? Why only the child? Towards everybody. Then you're not giving tremendous importance to your own reaction. Because your reaction is a very subjective thing, it's not the truth.
तो जितना आप सच्चाई को जान देंगे उतना आप छोड़ देंगे. You will leave everything in life.
नहीं, आप कुछ भी नहीं करते हैं. अगर आपने देख लिया कि ये झूठ है तो वो अपने आप छूट जाते हैं. उसके साथ आप जाएंगे नहीं. और अगर वो फिर भी चल रहा है तो इसका मतलब आपने देखा नहीं. आप खाली मान रहे हो, आपने एक ओपिनियन बना ली उसके खिलाफ, लेकिन आपने देखा नहीं है इस वक्त. क्योंकि देखिए, जब आप खतरा दिखता है तो खतरे में आप जाओगे नहीं. लेकिन जब खतरा दिखता नहीं है तो क्या होता है कि मन कर रहा जाने का, और माँ ने कहा था मत जाना, तो दुविधा में आता है मन. पर जब साफ दिखाई देता है खतरा तो दुविधा नहीं होती.
Hi sir. Good afternoon. Sir, I wish to know what is the similarity in both the process, science and spirituality you said now, to achieve, to progress in that field. What is the similarity?
Approach is similar. The approach is giving importance to attention, observation, doubt, inquiry, and watching, not reaction, without reaction, through awareness. Awareness is not reacting. See, I am right now, you are asking me a question, I am searching for words to express my thoughts, right? But I am aware of the audience, of the fact that it is getting late, 4:35, and so on. I am aware in general, कि मैं आया हूँ यहाँ पे ये कर रहा हूँ. That awareness is not a thought product. So the faculty of awareness is not a conditioned faculty. It's not mine or yours. It is nature has given us this gift. A child is born with awareness. वो शुरुआत कैसे करता है? उसकी भाषा नहीं होती, उसका विचार नहीं होते उसके अंदर, लेकिन देखता है माँ क्या कर रही है, क्या देखा, देख के वो. तो awareness is the initial thing which we possess. Language and everything else we learn afterwards.
So the process of science and spirituality both are same to progress in the...
No, the approach, I am saying, method नहीं लागू होता है. Science का method में measurement आता है. Measurement आप कर नहीं सकते. आप कितना प्यार करते हो अपने बच्चे को, कैसे नापोगे? तो measurement यहाँ पे नहीं हो सकता. इस तरह का मॉडल बनाना, वो सब नहीं हो सकता. तो scientific method लागू नहीं होता है. लेकिन scientific approach जो है, कि सत्य क्या है, उसको अज्ञात मानो और उसकी तहकीकात करो, है ना? मान के नहीं चलो कि ये मेरे गुरु ने कहा इसलिए ये सत्य है, और वो तुम्हारे गुरु ने कुछ और कहा तो मैं मारूंगा उसको. सब सत्य खत्म हो जाता है जैसे.
Yeah, please go ahead. Hopefully the last question.
Sir, I am living in a very high intensity of self-conflict, extremely high intensity of self-conflict, perhaps infinite. And my self-conflict is that,
अगर पर्सनल है सबके सामने नहीं.
No, I don't care.
अपन प्राइवेट में बात कर रहे हैं.
मैं बोल सकता हूँ, आप प्राइवेट में आंसर दे सकते हैं.
ठीक है. We can take it up later on.
हाँ,
बनारस आ जाओ जब इतनी दुविधा है तो.
हाँ,
मैं वहाँ रहता हूँ, आराम से बैठ के बात करेंगे. यहाँ तो मैं आया हूँ.
no, it's I'm having a difficulty of using some nice words so that I can express myself. और कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है.
Okay. Do you want to ask the question?
जो भाषा में बोल सकते हो उसमें बोलो.
Okay. So the self-conflict that there is in me is between the theme of the talk only, basically. I have a very high inclination towards Krishna ji, because I don't like the word spirituality, but let's say truth, let's say the subjective truth, the inner truth.
चलो उन शब्दों को इस्तेमाल कर लो और मुझे माफ कर दो. स्पिरिचुअलिटी इस्तेमाल कर लो.
So
शब्दों का खेल है. इतनी बड़ी बात.
So and the issue with me right now is that I am having a let's say humongous amount of fear of no money. I'm just a recent postgraduate from IIIT Bangalore in data science, and right now you see this fear of me having to have no money and no income source. And my intention is to I have to force my heart to work on the outer realm.
सबका समय लेके हम लोग इतना लंबा नहीं कर सकते.
Sorry.
ब्रीफ में
So brief में सर ये है कि
एक बात देखिए, आपके जीवन में आप शिक्षित हो गए, आप यहाँ आ पाए, ये कितनी बड़ी उपलब्धि है। अपन किससे कंपेयर कर रहे हैं? कितने गरीब लोग हैं अपने आसपास, उनकी कितनी हालत है, वो भी फिर भी एक कमरे में रहते हैं, फिर भी मुस्कुराते हुए आते हैं। तो कोई खता अपने में है ना, इतना सब मिला अपने को, उसके बाद भी हम शिकायत कर रहे हैं कि हमको ये नहीं मिला, हमको वो नहीं मिला, अभी हमें नौकरी नहीं मिली, लाइक दैट। तो थोड़ा सा अपने अंदर कहीं, वी आर नॉट टेकिंग लाइफ, योर सर्वेंट टेक्स इट। वो कैसे रहता है, उसकी कंडीशन और उसके पैसे कैसे हैं देखिएगा, तो आप किससे कंपेयर कर रहे हो? यू सी, द माइंड compares, decides who to compare with, what to compare about, and then passes and fails you. If it fails you, you get depressed. If it passes you, you feel elated. It's a game the mind plays with oneself. So you have to learn this.
So, yes, you have pointed out very right thing that there is always a becoming like the other kind of a stuff. Particularly in me.
आपकी परिस्थितियाँ उतनी खराब नहीं है जितनी और समाज के आसपास के लोगों की।
सर मेरी परिस्थिति बहुत खराब है, आपको अंदाजा नहीं है।
ठीक है, we need a personal interaction, so we can't go on.
पर्सनल यहाँ नहीं करेंगे सबके सामने।
Any other questions? हाँ कार्तिक, इधर से कार्तिक। हाँ speak.
Constant thing of the ending of time, both the inner time, the psychological time, and the outer time, the physical time.
No, you can't end the physical time.
So, what do you? I mean, what are your? I mean, could you elaborate on that? On when he says this?
Psychological time is something created by our own mind. If I am saying I want to achieve this, I want to become non-violent, I will practice this, do that, and so on. And 5 years later, I will become non-violent. I have also, in effect, given myself 5 years' time to remain violent. So that this psychological time, कि इतना time लगेगा मुझे वहाँ पहुँचने में, is just one's own creation. So it's something false. It doesn't actually exist, but the mind creates it. You have to see the falseness of it. That's why Krishna says, either you change now or the future is now. If you postpone it, you will keep on postponing it. तो वो अर्जेंसी नहीं आती है, लगता है कि अभी अपने घर में आग लग गई तब तो अर्जेंट है, और ये जो अपने जीवन में आग लगी हुई है ये अर्जेंट नहीं है, धीरे धीरे करूँगा मैं, उसको फूंक लगा रहा हूँ। अरे मन बहुत तंग करता है, मुझे नहीं करता, ऐसा नहीं कह रहा हूँ, मैं पहुँचा हुआ व्यक्ति नहीं हूँ, मैं आपके सर से।
The other thing is, I have another question. Can I? So. You talk about insight in science, which is, you have quoted the example of Einstein and Galileo and others. And also in the religious inquiry, you have also talked about Christ, the Buddha, and others. So how is it, when these were all gifted people who had this insight. But what about all the people who have, the ordinary people who don't have the gift of the insight? What do they do?
It is questionable whether it is a talent which is you are born with, or it is something that you yourself are blocking. So stay with that question and find out the answer. So that don't ask the answer from somebody else.
Yeah. Okay, give it to him.
So, can mind be understood through matter?
That's what scientists are trying to do.
Yeah, like
computer के अंदर artificial intelligence करके और robot बना के.
No, if I understand.
Scientist से पूछना कि उस robot से शादी करेगा? तो ये सब
Okay, with this we will end, and we thank Professor Krishna again for the very, very wonderful discussion he had with us. Please come over for high tea on the other side.
Before we end, I'll request Chair OLU to hand over the gift pack to Sir.
Okay. Okay. Some formalities too.
So the high tea is on that side of this floor. Please join us.